thank you, Eddie, and thank you, Religions for Peace, for inviting us and for giving us the opportunity and privilege to share with you all. My name is Ralph. I work for Hillsong Church. I look after our refugee response projects here in the UK. And tonight we'll be talking about how we started the Community Café in West London together with HTB Church, who's represented by Clay. So today I'll show you a little bit of the schedule. I'll be talking a little bit more about the current refugee situation and give you a little bit of a context of where we're coming from, why we started this project, and then Clay will talk more about what the Community Café is, why we started it, how it's engaging volunteers. I'll then pick up and talk a bit more about working with refugees and asylum seekers and our experience and how we've approached that for our Community Café and our, other projects that we do as well. And then Niwa will talk about trauma-informed practice. And then we have about hopefully 15 to 20 minutes time left to discuss any questions and answers. But we'll have a short Q&A at the end of each section to answer any immediate questions or clarification points that are needed for the different areas. And then we should wrap up by around 8 o'clock in the UK, different times in India and Greece, but hopefully not too late for everyone. So let me start with talking a little bit about the current refugee situation. I feel like I'm hearing every day on the news and updates on another refugee crisis or refugee situations or people being having to migrate forcibly from different countries. There's a lot going on in the world at the moment with different places of war. Just thinking about Sudan in the recent couple of months. But before we go into a bit more of the details and the stats, I thought it might be good to do a poll, see what your knowledge is on refugee matters, and get you engaged from the start. Because we like this webinar to be interactive and we'll talk, but we like to hear from you as well. So we'll start with a poll. We'll talk a bit more about the difference between refugee and asylum seekers in a second. You would think, yes, there's a lot of Ukrainians coming into the country at the moment, but they're already have refugee status, so they're not asylum seekers. But I'll go into that in a second. These are numbers from UNHCR, the mid-year trends in 2022, so it's not really up to date right now with everything that's happened in Sudan and I guess the other 6 months after June 2022. But at that time in June 2022, the numbers of refugees were 32.5 million refugees, plus there's another 53 million of people being internally displaced. So refugees are people being outside their own country. So people that have moved from, say, Syria to Turkey to Lebanon, or people from Eritrea have gone to Libya, Sudan, or other places. As you can see, the number of host countries, there's again Turkey, Colombia, Germany, Pakistan, Uganda are the top 5 countries of where refugees are being hosted. With Turkey, of course, because of the Syrian conflict, Colombia of Venezuela and the situation there. Germany has had a lot of Syrians and Ukrainians come into the country. Pakistan with Afghanistan being next door, and Uganda with a number of countries, South Sudan, Congo, and other countries in there. So that means that actually 74% of refugees are being hosted in low to middle income countries. It was interesting to see in the poll that most people think that most refugees are being hosted in so-called first world countries like Canada and Sweden, but actually the majority is being hosted in countries with a lower middle income that are close to where the conflicts have originated. Just some other, interesting stats. 76% of refugees come from just 6 countries, and again, you see the first 6 countries there: Syria, Venezuela, Ukraine, Afghanistan, South Sudan, and Myanmar. So 76% of all the refugees in the world come from only these 6 countries. And then actually, if you look at size of country and number of people, or like how many people in the population are refugees, Aruba, Lebanon, Curacao, Jordan, and Colombia are the ones that are hosting the most per capita. Again, kind of an interesting stat. Again, Aruba and Curacao, close to Venezuela, or actually islands off the coast of Venezuela, are hosting a lot of refugees there. Lebanon and Jordan, of course, with Syrians, and Colombia, the Venezuelan conflict. I'll go to the next slide. As I said, displacement and the refugee situation seems to be an ever-increasing development, an issue that we have to deal with in this time. This was from the latest report from the UNHCR, and as you know, it has to be updated already because Sudan, there's a war going on and people fleeing there. But some of the more recent, I guess, conflicts with the Ukraine, of course, but also Burkina Faso, in Ethiopia and the Tigray area, Mozambique, the Congo and Central African Republic always has been like a fragile area where a lot of refugees are being, or like a lot of people being displaced, whether in country or outside their country. But just to give you a global picture, and of course Afghanistan is still like an issue there as well. And as you can see, with Pakistan hosting many of the refugees there. Then coming to the UK and putting it in the UK context, and we can say a lot about it, but I just want to take this section to give a bit more of a quick context of where we're coming from and where we started the project in. According to the UNHCR in the UK, there are around 230,000 refugees, so people who are being recognized by the UK government as refugees and can stay here for a minimum of 5 years. And again, I'll go into the definitions in the next slide. And then there's around 127,000 people waiting for asylum, so they're seeking asylum. They've arrived to the UK, but they haven't got their refugee status yet. And that's some of the people, or most of the people that we see in our community cafe on a Monday night. Again, you can see one of the questions was, where do the most asylum seeking, what are the nationalities of the most of the asylum seekers? Albania, Afghanistan, Iran, but then also other countries that we've mentioned in the past in the stats, Iraq, Syria, Bangladesh, but also Eritrea and India, Pakistan and Sudan. An interesting development or trend that we're seeing in the UK at the moment is that the backlog of asylum seekers is growing. You can see that in the second diagram on the right, where normally it has been around 30,000, 40,000 people waiting for asylum on a yearly basis to wait for their decision to be made. But since 2020, which is kind of coincides when we started doing this project, since late 2020, it's gone up gradually. And the government or the Home Office seems to have, yes, there have been more people coming to the UK, but also less people have been processed. So the backlog has been growing on asylum cases, meaning that people are in limbo for an extended period of time. They have to wait longer, sometimes up to 2 years, sometimes 3 years before they get a decision, meaning that a lot of people have been placed in Home Office accommodation. And we'll go into more detail about that in a second. Just to give you this is an insight in what a journey might look like from one of the asylum seekers or refugees that we work with. It's not true for everyone. Some people arrive at different means, different ways to the UK. But say we have someone from Eritrea where there is a lot of oppression, and for especially young guys who have to join the army mandatorily, they like to get out because once they're in the army, it's hard to get out, and it's a oppressive regime. So they often go from Eritrea to Sudan through the desert to Libya, often on a if you see the car on the right or the truck loaded up on a truck through the Sahara Desert. The journeys are tough, really. People die on the way, and then they come to Libya, which is, as you might know, also like very unstable politically, and refugees and asylum seekers don't really get a good treatment there, and there's a lot of exploitation, abuse, and danger there. And then they try to make it to Italy, and I guess we've heard a lot about that in the recent years, people trying to cross over from Libya into Italian waters or European waters, and then being picked up by the Coast Guard or search and rescue boats, so they can come safely ashore, and then make their way through Italy, France, and to the UK, all in very horrible circumstances, really. This journey could take anything from a few months to a few years, depending on the different stages. And it's not necessarily a planned out process where they say, okay, I want to be in the UK in 3 months. It's often going from stage by stage, as far as I've been told, or I've been, shared. Some people shared their experience and said, initially they go to Libya for work, can't find work, so then they try to go to Italy. Italy, they don't find any opportunity to stay there, so they move on until they find a place. In the UK, in Germany, in France, it can be, and it's not everyone. This is one journey, and it's not everybody is coming to the UK, because the UK is only one of the destination countries, I guess, for refugees and asylum seekers. Once they come to the UK, their ordeal is not over yet. They face a lot of legal and other challenges whilst claiming asylum. They come to the UK, they claim asylum, and again, they are having to wait on an interview, actually 2 interviews, and then get a decision, a negative or positive decision. Now, in process, this looks very simple and straightforward. For some people, this takes years and years, which mentally and it causes a lot of issues with people that we work with, because they don't know when they have the screening. There's not a set timeline for this process, so it can take a very long time. At the moment, we work with mostly people who are still waiting on their interview, who are before their decision. So they've been placed in hotels and in home office accommodation that is called initial accommodation. Basically, they're being housed there, and we have a number of hotels in the Earls Court and Hammersmith area where we are based with our project. There's about 7 or 8 hotels in this area. People have been there since 2021. Waiting on a decision. They get £8 a week. Accommodation and food is provided, but they have no right to work. They have no rights to education in the first 6 months, and they can't really make any choices for themselves. So you can imagine, if they've been sitting in a hotel room for a year, mentally it's not really helping them a lot, and there's not really perspective on timelines a set outcome. So that makes it really difficult for them. Again, we talked a bit about that. You can see in comparison how many applications the United Kingdom receives in comparison to other European countries. 58,000 compared to 148,000 in Germany and 103,000 in France. So although the UK receives a substantial amount of asylum applications, it's not the most in Europe. But just to give you a bit more of perspective on that, just to summarize, at the moment, at the end of 2022, there was 166,000 asylum seekers waiting for their claim to be processed, with more than 110,000 waiting 6 months or more. And again, extended period of time in initial accommodation in simple hotels with no right to work, limited funds and little autonomy. They can't really make any decisions. And more recently, the narrative in media and politics has been about potentially deportation to Rwanda, army-based accommodation, or being illegal. Even to the point where community groups have been protesting outside some of these hotels, making asylum seekers feel scared, not welcome, and not wanted. So there's a lot of, I guess, different issues and challenges that asylum seekers face, not just in general coming to the UK or leaving their country, but especially as well coming to the UK. Don't want to go too detailed because we can talk all night about all of this, but we've got different definitions in the UK that we use for asylum seekers and refugees. We have an unaccompanied asylum seeking child, which basically is a young person under 18 that comes to the UK without any family or parents and is claiming asylum. Then we have an asylum seeker that's an adult claiming asylum who haven't received refugee status yet. Those are most of the people that we work with our Monday community Café. And as I said, processing can take about years, and then they get an allowance depending on where they live. If they're in initial accommodation like hotel accommodation, they get £8 a week. If they have in a shared accommodation like a house or an apartment, they get £45 a week to live on and do everything with, basically. A refugee is recognized as a person in need of protection, and they can get that status after a successful asylum claim. Normally it's for initial 5 years in the UK, and once they have refugee status, they have access to services like right to work, but also right to benefits and council support. The last three definitions: a refused asylum seeker. So it can be an asylum seeker whose claim has been unsuccessful, but they always have the right to appeal at least once. But if not, they will be deported. Migrants, I guess, is a wider definition. But there's a difference between forced and economic migrant, but it's not always very clear in definitions in the books. A migrant is not necessarily in need of protection, like refugees or asylum seekers. So we normally work with refugees and asylum seekers. A legal asylum seeker or an illegal refugee is sort of like a contradiction in terms. In theory, everyone has a right to claim asylum if they have a well-founded fear of prosecution and feel like they are in need of protection. And then it's up to the government of that state or nation to decide whether that if that claim is valid or not, which is the asylum process. So this is like the context of where we're coming from, the refugee situation globally, but also in the UK. Again, there's a lot more, and I have some recommendations on books and movies that I'll have at the end of the slides if you wanted to find out more.